Military retaliation for Syria's suspected chemical weapons attack now appears to be a matter of when, not if. U.S. forces are said to be ready to go, only awaiting President Obama's order. The commander-in-chief has been consulting with allied leaders by phone, and now the White House is offering some clues about what the looming strike will and won't entail. Our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, has got the latest information. What are you hearing over there, Jim?
Wolf, White House officials say President Obama is already discussing options for Syria, so he continues to line up support up on Capitol Hill and overseas for what appears to be an inevitable military strike for crossing that red line on chemical weapons. But White House officials are drawing other lines indicating just how far the president is willing to go. As White House officials say President Obama is making progress toward a decision to use military force against Syria, it was the vice president's turn to present the case for action.
Those who use chemical weapons against defenseless men, women, and children should and must be held accountable.
There must be a response.
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney all but telegraphed a strike on Syria in the coming days. But he would only make clear what's not in the president's array of military options. No boots on the ground in Syria and no effort to remove Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad from power. And as the president weighs his options, does he want to take out Assad? And would his death be a welcomed outcome at this White House?
I appreciate the question. I want to make clear that the options that we are considering are not about regime change. They are about responding to a clear violation of an international standard that prohibits the use of chemical weapons.
In an interview with the BBC, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said the Pentagon is awaiting the president's call.
If the order comes, you're ready to go like that.
We are ready to go like that.
President Obama now has nearly every major U.S. ally echoing his administration's goals for a Syria strike.
This is not about getting involved in a Middle Eastern war or changing our stance in Syria or going further into that conflict. It's nothing to do with that. It's about chemical weapons. Their use is wrong, and the world shouldn't stand idly by.
France is ready to punish those who took this disgusting decision to gas innocent people.
There is even a boost of support coming in from leaders in the Arab League.
We place full responsibility on the Syrian regime over this horrid crime, and we call for all perpetrators of this crime to be tried in international courts for war crimes.
Syria's foreign minister rejected the allegations and warned of consequences.
I categorically deny this matter. We have the materials to defend ourselves. We will surprise others.
But one key former U.S. weapons inspector, David Kay, said he's not buying it.
No one believes that the rebels have the capability to launch a large-scale chemical attack using aircraft and missiles. It's just beyond their inventory. These are AK-47 and RPG guys, not missile and pilots.
And White House officials continue to say they plan to release an intelligence assessment for their case against Syria, and that report is expected this week and before any military action is taken. And Wolf, one official, I should point out, did caution to us that they don't feel like this intelligence assessment is needed to make that case against Syria. They say that the evidence is already plain to see.
Wolf. A lot of us were expecting that intelligence report out today. What's the delay, if there is a delay?
They're not talking about any delay at this point, Wolf. They feel like at this point that this case was already made over the weekend when reports were starting to come in from independent medical organizations that said it was clear that it appeared chemical weapons were used. So at this point, they're still putting together that intelligence assessment. That is expected to be presented to the American people, presented to the world before any military action is taken. And that at some point this week it will be coming out, just not today.
All right, Jim Acosta over at the White House, thanks very much. Let's dig a little bit deeper right now with our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, and our chief national correspondent, John King. Gloria, it looks like pretty strategic advance right now. The Secretary of State yesterday, the Vice President today, maybe the President tomorrow.
Right. I mean, what you're seeing, as we were discussing yesterday, is the beginning of a real strategic rollout here, part of an education, if you will, of the American public, and as well as as the Congress. Congress is not in town. The president's on the phone. Secretary of State's on the phone. Secretary of Defense is on the phone with his counterparts. This is all up to the rollout. Part of that is declassifying some of this information to tell the American public. I spoke with one good source today who said, you know, this isn't like Saddam Hussein where we were looking for where his secrets were hidden. This is out in the open. However, now that the American public has been promised some of this declassified information and they're already out there saying that they're going to do it, I think it's incumbent upon them to do it.
But they look at the polls over at the White House, as you well know. The American public has made it clear they don't want to get involved in another Iraq, Afghanistan, even Libya, for that matter.
And that's why there's such high pressure on the president when he steps out. We've had Secretary Kerry, we've had the Vice President, we have Secretary Hagel as he travels. You just saw there in Jim's piece, you know, the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the President of France have already spoken to their people about this. And so the White House, you remember this from covering the White House. You save the president for when you're trying to get to the finish line, and so they're waiting to sort this out. The president has to make his case to the American people. But to the point about this intelligence assessment, we were told by some sources early this morning it would be out today. There is a bit of a tug-of-war inside the administration about how much to put out. And part of this, Wolf, is the hangover, the legacy of the Iraq War. They understand some American people will be skeptical. Some people in the president's own party, anti-war forces, will be skeptical. And people around the world. You're already hearing Iran, the Syrian government, saying you can't believe the United States. We've been down this road before. So they have a credibility bar to pass. And remember, Senator Barack Obama was very critical of the Bush administration, saying if you're going to do this, you got to make a better case for it. That's pressure on him.
And to that point, Wolf, I spoke with the senior Democrat, Chris Van Hollen, today. Let's take a listen to what he said exactly on this point of the administration needing to make its case publicly.
It seems pretty clear that chemical weapons were used, but I think that they should come forward with additional evidence linking the regime to that use of chemical weapons. After all, in Iraq, there were claims made that Saddam Hussein had stockpiles of chemical weapons. We went to war, turned out not to be the case.
Now, again, you talk to administration officials and they will say this is so different from Iraq and Saddam Hussein, but as John points out, that hangs over all of this.
And the timing is pretty awkward right now, because the end of next week, the president's supposed to be in St. Petersburg, Russia. He'll no doubt have to meet with the Russian President Putin, assuming he still goes, and there's every reason to believe he will still go. If it happens right after a series of U.S. cruise missile attacks against the Syrian ally of Russia, that could be awkward.
Could well even be in the middle of an operation, in the sense that our expectation is you'd have a first wave, then they have a battle damage assessment. How did those, assuming the first wave is cruise missiles, maybe some airborne targeting as well, then you have a battle damage assessment, and then almost always there's a second wave to sort of finish up what you wanted to do. My understanding is that Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, has told the president, number one, they're not going to go to Security Council. They know Russia and China would object. Ban Ki-moon understands that. My understanding is what he has asked the administration is to let those inspectors on the ground finish their mission. They're scheduled to be done on Sunday. So most people seem to think that you have until Sunday unless something changes. But for the president to be overseas when this is playing out again adds to the challenge he has, making the case not only to a very skeptical American public, but then on the global stage.
It's a G20 summit in St. Petersburg.
Let me raise this point. How bad would it look for the president to be isolating Putin in front of an international coalition there? I mean, as far as the president is concerned, I don't think that plays badly for him.
Well, it might help the Putin back in Russia.
Well, that's right. So it may work for everyone.
All right, guys, we'll see what happens with this trip. We'll see what happens over the next few days. Thanks very much. Coming up, I'll speak with the top Republican on the Senate Armed Services